great writer of nonfiction, the best. When I write, I try to write like John McPhee. He's written, I don't know how many books, and they're fascinating. He's written a few about plate tectonics, and it's fascinating because he isn't just talking about the facts of plate tectonics, he's talking about how plate tectonics affects people, how people are involved in the movement of continents and the creation of mountains and all that kind of stuff. But he approaches it from a human point of view, human perspective. And it works. It's like you're reading a novel. Lots of quotes and lots of scenes and lots of details. It's the details that I like. I kind of spend my life halfway between up in the clouds, not paying attention to anything that's going on, and other times when I'm researching something or writing, it's like I turn a switch. I gotta pay attention now, and I'll look for the details of what's going on, exactly what somebody's wearing, or how they walk, or the sound of their voice. Or if I were writing about this classroom, I would write about this technology here and the old chalkboard over there. Last time I taught, it was still chalkboards. That would be a telling detail about the zeitgeist, I guess. And as long as I'm doing advertising here, my father also wrote a book called Getting the Words Right, and it's about how to edit and revise your writing. And it says here it sold more than 80,000 copies, so it does a good job. So after Brazil there, I just started writing nonfiction and loving it. And it's taken me all over the world. It took me to Chernobyl just kind of by dumb luck, and it took me I wrote a book about nuns. You'd think that would be a boring book. It was the most fascinating, and I might say dangerous book I've ever written. 2 books on nuns, because they're in the most incredible places where you wouldn't even want to get off the bus, and there they are living there, and they're 70 or 80 years old, and living in a gang-controlled slum in Brazil, or the desert in Swaziland. Spent a month with some nuns in Swaziland. They're out there in this, not desert, but pretty arid, stark place, and 1 out of 3 people had AIDS. And there were even more cases than that of tuberculosis. And they're in there working on a shoestring budget. They didn't have any money, and they're just running 18 hours a day trying to save people's lives. They somehow they had this little, kind of like a little town sort of, but they actually built a municipal water purification system using shovels. This is in a place where you can't even get a wheelbarrow, or it would be really hard, or if you need a shovel, it's really hard to come up with a shovel. And somehow they built this thing, and you could actually drink the water. There they are in Africa, and you can drink the tap water in this place. Fascinating stuff. And nuns who are in these, this little town just south of the Mexican border, out in the desert, the last town before the border, and the migrants coming up out of Central America that would be the last place before they crossed the border, and then would spend 3, 4, 5 days walking through the desert. These nuns had a place where people could stay and get their strength back, and maybe get some fresh clothes or something. What was I going to say about that? Oh, so this whole town completely controlled by gangs, or a gang, and nobody leaves without paying them some money, and they kidnap people and force the families down in El Salvador to come up with $3,000 or they'll kill whoever it was they captured, and they did that a lot. The priest was the only person who could go back and forth between that gang people and the police. The police were also in on the corruption, but he told me some stories that were just, anyway, one of these nuns, somebody captured one of her people, had been staying in their house, and she went right up there to one of these gang houses, banged on the door and said, I hear you got so-and-so in there, I want him out here, and they let the guy go. And some other nuns in Brazil, in a working in a gang-controlled area where the police cannot go. The police comes in through the certain entrance, they'll shoot him dead right there in the spot. An army truck took a wrong turn and went into this area, and they shot everybody in the army truck. It's actually one of the safest places in Brazil, because they do have the place under control. But you just have to do what they say and be a good boy. If you beat your wife, they'll beat you up. And you smoke crack, you can use any drug you wanted, and they sold a lot of drugs, but no crack. They drew the line at crack. If you smoke crack, you're out. And these nuns just go waltzing in there, and you turn left off the street, and there's a guy with a machine gun, and just sees who's in the car, and okay, go on, you can go in, or, a lot of people go in to get drugs, and they just say, all right, you're here to get, what do you want, coke? Go down here, turn left, there's a table, and you go down there, and there's a table, and 2 or 3 guys with machine guns sitting around, and there's all the drugs on the table. So.
Want to say more about Chernobyl?
Chernobyl, that was dangerous too, that was crazy. I hadn't really intended to go there. This was the end of 1990, and it was still the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union was about to, collapse or give up. And there was going to be a conference basically on how to deal with capitalism, because they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to do the accounting. They never had to deal with profit or anything. And I got invited by the mayor, I guess, of St. Petersburg to be there for 3 days and write about this conference that they were having. Well, while I was there in those 3 days, the Soviet Union collapsed. I didn't know that was going to happen. Wasn't my fault. Maybe it was, I don't know. I get there, boom, problem solved. No more Soviet. So I thought, all right, I'm not going home. Who needs a visa for a country that no longer exists? So I got on the train and went down to Ukraine, and just I didn't speak the language or anything, just kind of I couldn't believe how just dumb luck led me to the right people, and pretty soon I'm interviewing families that live nearby, and nuclear engineers who were at the plant on the day it blew up. And, it was crazy. I don't do that. But I was totally immersed. This is a really key point. I was totally immersed in this subject. I was living it day and night and watching my back and trying to understand what people were talking about and hearing all these different stories and trying to figure out, everybody had a motive. I had to assume everybody was lying, trying to figure out, okay, this guy's with the government, he's saying what the government wants you to say. This person's a journalist, everybody's got their motives for what they're saying, and I don't think truth had a whole lot to do with it. And the real story to me was not just Chernobyl, but Ukraine, and really the Soviet Union. Nobody in charge, no government. The mafia basically running the place by default, and the tap water, I was drinking radioactive, tap water was radioactive, and food was radioactive, and you can't even find food. And nobody knew who they were working for. Everybody used to work for the government. Now there's no government. Everybody's depressed as hell. Everybody's, lost people. People are dying right and left, and they still have lead in the gasoline, so everybody's got lead poisoning, and everybody smokes cigarettes, and everybody's an alcoholic. What a situation. I really ended up writing more about Ukraine at that moment in history when I don't know what the word for that is, when anarchy, extreme depression, of course depression will kill people too, and they were suffering from that, there's cancer all over the place, oh, what a mess. And I was kind of lucky to get out alive, I guess. So I wrote a book called Journey to Chernobyl, and it might be in the library here, but if not, you can get it from libraries. You can read about it. It's not the best book I ever wrote, but it is kind of interesting. What else? So my career's taken me to Swaziland and East Timor out in the Pacific Ocean, and Central America and Brazil, and up the Amazon, and another nun in the Amazon area there. And, you picture Amazon, you're picturing ripe trees and vines and monkeys running around. No, it's all, I didn't see any forest whatsoever. I ranged over a 300-mile area, and there's no forest. It's all fields and cattle and stuff. And this poor nun is trying to hold things together. She's trying to help. They still got slaves there. She's trying to help fugitive slaves, and she's trying to help women who are abused, and trying to help them start businesses. And there's all these landless people who are entitled to land that's held by rich people, and they're all camped along the side of the road, waiting for the government to finally make a decision. And she's pushing the courts, and she gets death threats on the phone all the time. I was standing there when the phone rang, and somebody said to her, "We know where you are right now, and we know who you're talking to, and this is your last day on the face of the earth." And I was like, I didn't know it was that bad. And at one point, they were like chasing us down the road, but they didn't get us. Escaped.
You want to talk about some of your history books about Thanksgiving?
All
and,
right. So okay. Good example of creative nonfiction would be my book about Thanksgiving. It's called Thanksgiving: Pilgrim's First Year in America. And one purpose in writing it was I wanted my son to see that history can be interesting. So I wrote it in an interesting fashion. And Lee's wife just told me they were in Rome, and she was reading my book, and I'm like, and she said it was very interesting. Whoa, more interesting than Rome? Wow. She said, no, it wasn't that interesting, but interesting. It's very popular, and I did it by writing about the people. It's what these people went through in that incredible first year, with half of them died on the boat. You know, they arrived in November, and Cape Cod, and it's cold, and they got nowhere to live, and they have to live on this boat, and they all got sick, and half of them died. They're people lying in the hold of this ship for, lying next to a dead person for 2 or 3 or 4 days because they were all too weak. That's drama. That's, boy, you can't make a novel any better than that. And so I just wrote about, the people. Somebody kept a journal during that year, so we kind of know what they did from day to day. And it would be worth reading the introduction to the book, because I explain how I wrote it. Because there's a lot of supposition in there. There's, I got my facts right. I did. It took me 10 years to write this book. I thought I could do it in 3 months. It took me 10 years. Because every fact just led to another fact, and I had to find out how they did it or why they did it that way. And what was I going? So just reporting the strictly historical documented fact would be one thing, but it would fall short of the truth. And to get at the truth of what it was like, then I had to have a lot of, and I would put in these little tags that would tell people this isn't really a known fact. I would say things like, they probably, or they must have, or how could they resist, or as far as we know, or, and trying to get the deeper truth of that whole incredible human emotional experience. Like, for example, so the Mayflower spent the whole winter there. They couldn't go back during the winter across the ocean, so they just sat out there in the harbor. And finally, in April, it was time to go, and I just imagine all these people, sitting on this hill above the ocean there, and watching that boat turn around and sail away, how it must have felt. We don't know how it felt. We don't know. Maybe they didn't look. But they had to. How could you not? And there goes this boat. Nobody in Europe knew where they were. The odds of the ship getting across the ocean weren't real good. It did make it, but I thought I could get at a deeper truth by relating that scene that we don't even really know what happened. Nobody wrote about it. I just wrote about what it must have been like, which you can't really do in your average history book, and really academic history books shouldn't do that, and that's fine. I was writing a different kind of history. I wanted it to be a different kind of history, and indeed it was. And it's been very popular. I'll mention, I think maybe Lee has told you about this other book I wrote. It's my most recent book. It's called The Ruminist. And it's about, so I wrote this book, so there's a I don't know if theory is the right word, but some people say that the novel came about during the Industrial Revolution, as people were becoming, factory workers and a little bit less human, because they were like little machines that just went to work and did the same thing all day and everything. And so Dickens would be your classic example of novels as a humanizing or a preservation or a respect of human beings and what it's like to be a human being, what a human being is, and empathy and stuff like that. So I wrote this novel, and it's kind of in defense of people in an age where it's not the industrialization that we're going through, because it's different from that, but people are so technologically linked in and so at one with technology, and they're becoming separated from other people that way. And nature is off in the distance somewhere. Reality is in your laptop. So I wanted to write a different kind of book that would kind of resist that, and it's called The Ruminist, and the ruminist, it's a word I made up, and it just refers to someone who thinks, someone who sits down and notices things